Coming up, it's a brand new week, but we're continuing our coverage of the Inclusive Africa Conference 2025.
You're listening to Double Tap, your daily accessible technology show. Now, here's your hosts, Stephen Scott and Shaun Preece.
Hey guys, welcome back to another week of shows. A very exciting week, of course, this week, Shaun Preece, because today is the day that Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference gets underway. And it's really, ultimately, I think, the time we ask ourselves the question, is Apple finished? Oh, no, sorry. I mean, is Apple, behind?
Behind. Well, today we will get that answer, I think. Hopefully not.
I tell you one thing, I'm never getting an answer from Apple again.
No, that's it.
That's it. Those bridges
well done,
are
Stephen.
burned. I know. No, look, I'm very interested to learn about what's coming. Of course, as much as I say what I say, I still am going to be there with popcorn. I'm going to be waving my Apple logo.
Yes, Apple t-shirt, Apple hat.
My phone, my iPad, my Apple Watch. Wave there, hello, because I love what Apple do, and but I do, right? And I love what they do, and I think what they do, and I mentioned this before about the whole thing on accessibility and the importance of what they do. I don't want to see it go away. I don't want it to be finished. I want it to thrive. So these events give us an indication as to where they're going. Now, of course, there's going to be a lot of promises made at this event, so we'll see what that actually transpires later in the year when the software launches. Because even though the event happens today, the results of the event kind of appear around about September, October time. So we're going to be getting into that.
Yeah. I just want some reassurance. Even if there's nothing to show, I want some reassurance that
Tim Cook to cuddle you, to hug you.
I do, basically. Just give me a cuddle, say everything's going to be okay, and I'm happy.
Well, I don't think we're going to get that. But I tell you what we are going to get. We're going to have an amazing panel on tomorrow's show. We're going to be joined by Carrie Morales, of course, of Carrie on Accessibility, and Shelley Brisbane, the author of the iOS Access for All book and well-known voice here on Double Tap. Both are joining us tomorrow on the show. And for those of you who've signed up to our exclusive feed, our exclusive podcast feed, this coming weekend, you'll get an extra special dollop of WWDC coverage. I like dollop. Double Tap Dollop. That's what we should call it.
There's
Double
the name.
Tap Dollop. That's the name.
That's terrible.
Please, I love that.
Please carry on.
That's it. Double Tap Dollop.
Someone see if the website's available.
I think it might be. Anyway, yes, sorry, I threw myself off my own stride there. We're going to have an extra dollop of coverage from WWDC with a reaction from Michael Babcock and Callum Stoneman on the show. My alarm's going off to tell us we need to get back to the Inclusive Africa Conference. And let's get to our first guest. Why don't you introduce yourself?
So my name is Sachin Pavithran. I am the Executive Director for the United States Access Board, which is a federal agency based in the United States under the White House. So what we do is we write the technical standards on accessibility for the built environment, transportation, and ICT. So we're an independent agency that writes regulations to ensure accessibility in the United States.
Sachin, welcome to Double Tap. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us about what you're talking about, because of course I imagine there's plenty to talk about when it comes to accessibility standards and implementing all those standards. Why are you talking about it at Inclusive Africa?
So I was, being a blind person who's always been interested in accessibility for personal reasons, but also professionally, it's always good to learn what's happening outside the space that I work with on a daily basis. So not to just share the knowledge I've gained, but also learn from others so we can share our ideas and kind of bridge the gap, because accessibility is a global issue, not a national issue. So I've been here for a couple of days, learning a lot. I had the opportunity to keynote on Tuesday, and then networking with a lot of people.
I mean, in your role, what is it you're overseeing? Are you checking on accessibility standards? Are you writing those standards in the US government? What is your role?
So in my role, I'm the head of the agency. So the agency writes the technical standards. So we are the agency that prescribe what and define what the accessibility should look like in the different environments. And we do not do the implementation and enforcement. Other agencies with the authority does the enforcement and implementation. So we are the more of the technical experts when it comes to accessibility.
So are you finding you're taking more away, or are you bringing to Inclusive Africa? What's your experience been so far?
It's hard to tell how much of each. I think it's both. I'm definitely learning how, what are the different ways people are managing accessibility with not the similar way of not having the standards in place, not having, all the legislation that we have the privilege in the U.S. to have. So how are disabled people, how are blind people functioning with what they have? And it's always fascinating to see, people are figuring it out, even with the bare minimum what they have, and doing things in a very remarkable way. So I'm learning those tricks that people have figured out, especially the blind population here in Nairobi. I was just talking to an individual right before I came up here on how he just climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, which is something I'm planning on doing in a few months. And so learning from him, what did he do? So those kind of little tips and tricks.
Yeah. Is everyone climbing Mount Kilimanjaro? I'm feeling left out here.
We're never going to do that, Shaun.
No, we're not. No.
But, I think we have to kind of talk about the realities of today's world, right, Sachin? I mean, we're in a very difficult situation, especially for you in the US, when it comes to, what is going on politically. I don't know how much you can speak to this, but, there is a reality here that, there are a lot of disabled people who are concerned about where things are going, where things are headed. And accessibility standards is one of those areas where, people are concerned that, as a rush seems to be to get out of the idea of thinking of DEI, and let's include the A for accessibility in that, because a lot of people forget to do that. In a rush to kind of move away from DEIA, there's a risk to the standards, the kind of work you're doing.
Yeah, so, being someone who works right under the White House, I got to be careful what I say here. So, is there a concern? Yes, there's always a concern when new administration comes into office. We do not know what the intention, what the desire is going to be. So we're working through, the current administration, what their scope is on different areas. Now, there are challenges with different ideologies coming in. What we're trying to do, at least myself in my position that I hold and the influence that I have, trying to separate the accessibility piece as much as I can, but also helping to them to understand the return on investment on having people with disabilities being employed. What does that mean? Because there's a big conversation about cutting waste and being more efficient. So my idea in the conversation is keeping accessibility standards and promoting accessibility standards actually creates more efficiency, so you do not have to spend the kind of dollars for unemployment and the services that are there for people with disabilities needs to be there. But if you remove those expenses are just going to keep going up. So kind of making an argument, helping them understand the benefit, but also helping them understand this is not a political issue. This is a win-win for no matter what political party you have, no matter what your philosophy might be. But this is a non-controversial issue that really helps people in the longer run, whether you are disabled today or you may be disabled in the future.
I mean, I suppose I'm wondering, because we hear so much noise. I mean, if you sat and watched 24-hour news, you would think the world was ending tomorrow, right?
Exactly.
So, I wonder how much of what we're hearing, how much of the fear that is stoked online, that people are feeling, genuinely feeling, is actually based on anything other than hyperbole. Is it real? I mean, what is actually going on? I mean, do you feel there's an attack on disabled people in the US, or do you feel that is a narrative rather than reality?
There are concerns, if you step away from the accessibility standards, and when you start talking more about healthcare, one of the big conversations right now in the U.S., you have what they call the Medicaid, Medicare options in healthcare, which provides a lot of funding for people with disabilities, especially those who do not have employment, those who have conditions that require some extra coverage when it comes to healthcare. There are concerns where those might be stripped away. So nothing's happened yet, but there are red flags because of some of the narrative that are being talked in Congress, some of the push for change that are coming from some of the groups that are trying to do what they think is best. So the fear is accurate. And I think people should be concerned, but people also should not just sit back and not do anything about it. They need to be, advocating, talking to their lawmakers and making sure the community that they govern has needs. And this is not something they can just look the other way.
Yeah, as so many people we've spoken to here, it's all about people being heard and getting their voice out there. You need to be heard to make a difference. Absolutely. Talking of making a difference, standards, and you help set standards. So where are we at with standards? When is every website going to be accessible for me? Can you fix that?
How's that going, Sachin?
I wish I could just do it with a flick of my finger, but unfortunately, I feel like we've come a long ways, but we still got a long ways to go, especially in the private sector. Now, I know in the European Union, at least from the US, we're eagerly waiting what's going to happen with the European Accessibility Act, that coming into play here in a few weeks. What the how all the implementation is going to look, what it's going to look like. So there's a lot of frustration. Myself being a blind person, obviously I'm frustrated with the inaccessible content that I keep running into, not just in my personal life, but also in my professional life, in my employment, to do some of the tasks that you would think is basic tasks. So when will it get done? I don't know. I wish it was sooner than later, but it's a work in progress. But I hope we don't have to keep dealing with this ongoing.
Can we talk a little bit about the European Accessibility Act and what your understanding is of what that will do? Because obviously it's an act which applies to Europe, but of course it has worldwide implications. I mean, we saw this for consumers. We saw this when Apple were forced to put the USB-C port onto their iPhones because, essentially they wouldn't be able to sell them into Europe otherwise. That was changed, although Apple did, in fact, sell it as a feature of the new iPhone, which I always thought was quite funny. But, nothing to do with regulation or rules. But, obviously this will have a huge impact. What are you, because you must be really into this, you must be really digging into this to kind of understand how it will impact your work.
Yeah. With us, we don't have the level that the EAA is going to do in the private sector. That's what we are more interested to see, how the private sector is going to react and what are they going to do to bring it up to speed. Because we're very behind when it comes to some of the accessibility things that the private sector should have been on the same level as the public sector. I feel like we do fairly well in the federal government, the city and state, the local level. But when it comes to private sector, we have a long ways to go. So that's the piece that we're really watching. What is the private sector going to do? Are they going to comply, or are they going to, try to find a loophole? And also you see how the standards really, how that really has the impact of it.
I remember sitting down with someone at an event in the UK called TechShare Pro a few years ago, Malin Rigg. She was from Norway, and she told me about how in her government, one thing that they had done was bring in some pretty severe enforcement rules. Which meant
I just
that
did
companies.
a panel with her.
Well, there you go. Right, you'll know the story, of course, of the,
Yeah.
the essentially, was it 15,000 euros a day or something
Yep.
was the fine if companies, and this was private sector, it wasn't public sector.
Yeah.
If they did not get their websites sorted out in time, they would have a per day fine. And we had a discussion at the time about how far you go with the carrot versus the stick approach in order to get companies to comply. Where do you fall on this issue?
I think it's a great approach. I just don't think in the US, it'll never work. You got plenty of lobbyists that is going to shoot that down really fast. It's great that it's worked in Norway, and I think it probably works in that community, that society. Every country is going to be very different. I'm for it if we can make it happen. I just know it will not happen in the US.
That's interesting.
That's a shame. That's a shame because it's all about reinforcing legislation, isn't it? It's giving those enforcements teeth. And if it's simply a case as, well, we know they won't do it because of lobbyists, that's a real shame.
It is. It is, and it's unfortunate, but
it's the reality.
That is the reality we live in, and we need to find other ways to have more of enforcement. Because the U.S. model is more based on the legal framework, lawsuits after lawsuits, which is an expensive and a long, drawn-out framework.
Yeah, I mean, what is the solution then? Because the other option is, I guess, unless there's a third option I'm unaware of, that you go to a company and you say, look, it's the right thing to do. And you appeal to the heart. You appeal to the fact that, the dollar is of a disabled person is worth the same as someone who's non-disabled. Is that the other way to do it?
I think that needs to go hand in hand. We work pretty closely with industry to get a buy-in, having the culture shift within their organization. Why inclusive access, all those topics are very important in their business, and also making the case, like you just said, that people with disabilities do have disposable income. You're losing that profit margin when you don't include our community in your business portfolio.
I mean, do you feel, and I know it's difficult to speak on this, but do you feel it is a scary time for disabled people at the moment? You've said the fear is real. Is it a scary time? It's
probably a little more scary right now because there's a lot going on, but it's not any different than it has been in the past. Now there's too much going on, so that I think it probably increases the fear because we don't know where to focus. But some of the issues are not new issues. These issues have been around for a while now. We just haven't solved it. We just tacked on more issues on top of the existing stuff right now.
Which is life in general these days, isn't it?
Yeah,
and that's life for everybody. Sachin, it's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for the work you do, and come back again. We'd love to talk to you again.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the work that you guys are doing.
Oh, Stephen, talk about putting him under the spotlight there. That was a bit harsh.
What was harsh? I've got to ask these questions. Come on.
He said he's got to be careful what he's talking about there, and you just keep going. Well done.
Well, kind of the way I do it. Right, listen, let's move on because we have another amazing guest standing by. Let's go to our next guest. If you would introduce yourself.
Well, I am Senzo Mbonambi, and I'm from South Africa. I'm a Chief Operations Officer at an ICT center in South Africa called LeadChange Developments. So basically what we do is we scale young people from an entry level, moderate level to an apex level, which is a high level. And we do this free of charge. We use CSI to acquire the funds, and then by virtue of that, then once they are done their training, then we try and place them. The entire model is designed under sustainability. So what we simply do thereafter is get them a job. If we can't get them a job, then we try and ensure that we get them to formulate cooperatives, and then they can start assisting their communities with the type of skill of which they already have. Looking at the crime statistics in the country, it's very unsafe nowadays to have a stranger to come and assist you with your router, come and assist you with any of these technological assistive devices, but it's always better to get your neighbor, someone whom you grew up with. So by virtue of that, we're skilling the community and we're skilling young people so that they can start immediately assisting those, or rather addressing those challenges in their communities. We've been around for for about 10 years, and this is what we've been doing. And we've done quite well with regards to that. And from an advocacy point of view, we want to use skills to advocate for persons with disabilities as opposed to just talk or mostly talk. There's this old saying in English that says talk is cheap. But however, now we are using pragmatic solutions to come with innovative ideas to try and assist communities. And if we can, we want to run this in the continent, but currently we are mostly based in South Africa, and we are increasing our skills mandate to the entire landscape of South Africa. So in the short, that's what we are and who I am.
Wow, that is incredible. What an amazing job. Upskilling young people, bringing skills, essentially neighbor helping neighbor, right? I mean, you bring up so many points here. I honestly don't know where to start, but I think I want to begin with that comment you made about it being unsafe in some areas and trust being an issue, bringing someone into your home. These are issues which will impact on certain communities, but is that common across South Africa at the moment?
Crime is common everywhere. And in South Africa and in Africa in general, because of low economic opportunities, poverty is rife in the countries or in the continent. So by virtue of that, once you have low income or communities impoverished, then you are bound to have crime, because then it's crime against crime and crime against people, because people are just diverting towards crime so that they can get something to eat. So by virtue of that, then our rates go skyrocketing and they go higher up. So by virtue of that, if you're looking at something like that, then you come up with something, maybe in layman's terms, where we can tag it and say business against crime, where then you scale people and then you teach them maybe yet another way of which they can escape their poverty, to say this is what you can do. Furthermore, you're also looking at other global opportunities that are available now. As an example, we have a new terminology, someone called a virtual assistant, right? And before someone can become a virtual assistant, they need that type of skill, and they need their devices, be it whether it's a smartphone. If it's not a smartphone, then it's a laptop, and they need strong internet connection, and that's all they need. From a financial perspective, it becomes quite easier for them to be able to do these jobs. But young people are not aware of such. By virtue of that, then they resort to what they think may generate income for them, which is quick and fast, because it then feeds into a certain lifestyle that they want to lead. So by virtue of that, we are not simply diverting young people or ring fencing the type of opportunities that are there, but what we're simply doing is we're opening the gate wider, and we're saying just come in. There are opportunities and you don't have to resort to crime. And by virtue of that, we're actually hoping that we can actually impact the crime statistics in South Africa and actually drop them significantly. And some of these crimes may include things like that may stem from frustration, like gender-based violence, this, that, and the other, all these type of social ills, car theft, this, that, and the other, and so on and so forth. There's a market for it, so people are doing it. So, but I'm simply saying, by virtue of skills, of which has been proven now, that people can change their lives and people can change communities. And we can rather change this whole impoverished status in our communities by acquiring the right skill. And it's very important to get the right skill, if I may continue there, Steve, because if you're looking at it from that perspective, there's a whole lot of jobs that we were used to in the third industrialization. And administrative work and so on and so forth. But now in the fourth industrial revolution, we look at a lot of jobs, a lot of things that have been automated, but they are also giving access to new jobs. But by virtue of that, those need new acquired skills. And by what is happening now is young people are still going the traditional route of, I want to become a teacher, I want to become this, and I want to become that. And by virtue of that, the skill that they have versus the job demand is a direct contrast. But as an ICT center, we're even saying that Whether you have your qualification in psychology, you have a qualification in business administration, a qualification in, and maybe say in teaching, then you can come to us and then we can upskill you and bring you back to par by giving you an ICT qualification, of which perhaps you either could incorporate or you could use to further yourself and better yourself.
Oh yeah, I mean, having some sort of training in any technology is core to so many different careers now, right? If you don't have technology experience, you're really on the back foot. And as you mentioned, crime spikes when there is sort of no hope or no direct route out of poverty. So giving people these choices, especially with technology training, the world just opens up to you with it. As you said, with the internet connection, the job market really does open up. You mentioned though, the young people. Is that
Yes.
the age range you concentrate on, or is there something for maybe someone who's slightly older? Do you cater for those as well?
Are you interested, Steve? Are you slightly a bit older?
I'm always interested. I think I'm far too old. I'm nearly retiring, so yes, I would be.
Both are.
Yeah, Steve. The category and the target is between the ages of 18 to 35. So it's insinuated that, especially in South Africa, once you get most people when they get to the age of 18, then they exit the basic education system. So they've done their grade 12, which is matric. And then by virtue of that, then that is when they enter into further education training at 19 years, 20, and so on and going forward. So this is when they have access to either universities or they have access to other skills colleges and so on and so forth. So 18 to 35 is considered as the youth category in my country. So currently, we are facing an unemployment rate of just the statistician who took out the stats earlier this year that looked at January to March. We are a population of about, say, 60 million. But you have 8 million people that are considered to be job seekers that are still unemployed. And in that period as well, you had about 290,000 people that have lost their jobs. And then furthermore, on the other end as well, just to add to that, you also have another percentage of 3.4 million who are NEET. And these are people that are not in education nor in training. So that element of hopelessness. And then to look at the right wing, where you find 16.8 million people who are considered to be employed. So these are all people that are taxable in this instance. Now, if you're looking at the opposite end, where you're looking at 8 plus 3, you have 11 million. And then from that 11 million, 60 to 65% of that population is the youth. And that is concerning, because then this is the future of the country, right? So what we're simply saying now is, it's not that necessarily that the jobs are not there, but somewhere, somehow, it's the skills that they have acquired, which is a challenge or the question here. So maybe we need to relook and revisit the type of skill that we are giving to young people and see if, from a remuneration point of view, if this is something that it will interest them and will remunerate them at the level of which they want to be at. So that is what we are simply doing in South Africa as a country and as an organization. This is the direction and the position that we have taken to say, we want to raise our hands, we want to help the youth, we want to help the future of the country, because we understand that people like Steve, they are nearing the twilight. So by virtue of that, that's okay with them. But what happens to those...
Hey, listen, by the way, that was Shaun that asked that question, not me. I'm not entering the twilight of my years.
Keep saying Steve, I like it.
Yeah. Fine. Now I feel like I'm entering the twilight of my years. Look, I want to ask you this as well about infrastructure, because look, everyone says the same thing, right? Technology is the answer to everything, okay? But if the infrastructure isn't there, if you go to a rural community and you can't get broadband or decent broadband or even a decent 5G connection, if that's available at all, you've got other challenges, right?
100%. And you actually are quite right. But, Steve, what we're doing at LeadChange Developments now is we've looked at that and we've developed an incubation model, right? So this model allows our people that access our center to be able to utilize the infrastructure and the computers of which they have in the center to conduct the work of which the service provider may require from them. I'll make a typical example. To say if service provider X, maybe in this instance if it's MTN or Telco, wants to employ 50 persons with disabilities. Obviously, the biggest challenge will be transport, infrastructure, navigation, and so on and so forth. But where we are positioned geographically, if that young person is able to just cross the street to a place of learning, what stops them from crossing the street to a place of work? And then where they are comfortable and where the infrastructure is already set for them, and then we incubate them, they do what they have to do in the day, and then afterwards they cross the street and then they go home. And then afterwards they have remuneration. But furthermore, what we're simply saying is COVID taught us when we were going through COVID that everyone can now work from home. And from an infrastructure point of view, we have 4 to 5 different service providers. And internet is not relatively cheap, but there are so many other hotspots of which you can have, and you can get solid internet at home. I'll make a typical example. If you want uncapped internet access in South Africa, you're looking at about, say, 400 rands to about 500 rands a month, right? And persons with disabilities in my country get something of which we call a disability grant, which means the government gives them a minimum of 2,310 rands every month for them to survive, right? So if a young person is there already, the access is there, all they just need is all the other tools, and then they're good to go. And the right set of skill, and apart from the right set of skill, is the right mind and the right attitude to want to change their lives. And if you have that in the combination, then you are guaranteed that you will get success. So by virtue of this, I'm just simply saying that it's not that the appetite to employ is not there. But if you think about it, and you really, really think about it, Shaun and Steve, and you're thinking about it carefully from a business point of view, hypothetically speaking, you are company X, and you've been doing so well. And according to the South African context, the quota say you must employ at least a minimum of 7% in terms of equity in your company, which will be the persons with disabilities. You have a staff complement of 100. That means you're only looking at 7% versus the 93. Now, you're encouraged to employ these 7. They come to your office, and only to find that there is now this element of reasonable accommodation. You've got staircases. You have 3 floors. You only have steps. You need to get an elevator. You get a quotation to enhance or develop the building. You get a quotation of 600 to 700,000 rands. Now you're sitting at home. You're a businessman. You're asking yourself, I need to pay 700,000 rands to service a 7%, only to service a 7%, when on the opposite hand, I've been doing well with the 93. Would you then sit back and say, I am willing to pay that 700,000 in order to service these people, even though it's not guaranteed what you're going to get out of it? I just feel from a disability point of view and a disability perspective, we are saying the right things, but we are not speaking the right language. Because everything else of which we want to speak on or about comes from an element of sympathy. But when you're looking at business is cutthroat. It's green, or rather it's either black or it's white. There's no gray area in between. And that is the environment of which we want to create, to say, this is what I want, but you should do it because this is the condition, or this is maybe perhaps the background I am coming from. So all of these things that we are getting from a toe-to-toe point of view, it's all good and it's all well, but the wheels are just turning too slow, and we need to fine-tune our message to business so that it is from business to business and it makes business logic. So if, for me, personally, I am a person who's visually impaired. If someone was to come to my company and say, listen, it will cost you 700,000 to ensure that you comply with reasonable accommodation standards. Oh, okay. But then I will ask, how much is the fine? Then the fine is 20,000. Then I'll rather pay 20,000 and forget about it. Service my 93,000 and sleep better at night, right? Mm-hmm. Now, because this now comes from a sympathy point of view, then that is what we need to address. We need to go back and look at how we phrase our language. As an example, I'm here today at the Digital Africa Conference, Accessible Conference. I've been walking around, I've been meeting a lot of innovators. Amazing work. A lot of them, you ask them, why did you create this? No, my friend is visually impaired, so I want to create this app. Oh, okay. Next one, no, my cousin is mute or deaf, so this is what I want to do for them. All good and well. However, if I, as a visually impaired person, am your market, number one. Number two, I don't have access to opportunities. So will I be able to afford whatever it is that you want to sell to me? And from a business sustainability model, will this thing be sustainable? Now, all the innovators here have the technical skill because they are developing, but do they have the business acumen that is required? That is where we are struggling. So if we are now saying to business tomorrow, can we start having incubators for young people? Just to make another example, there are a lot of good soccer players. People that play soccer, they know formations. You play striker, you play midfield, goalkeeper is supposed to stop. They are all talented. But ask me, what do? Why do they all have to go to the school of excellence before they turn pro? It's because someone needs to incubate them so that we finesse and refine that skill of which that person has, so that when they move over into the business world, then they understand that this is cutthroat business. And then now all the innovations are no longer thriving on the sympathy and the empathy category, but now we are moving them into cutthroat, whether they are good or they are not. So that is what I think personally we need to migrate towards. And this is what the organization LeadChange Developments is striving to do for young people with disabilities.
Well, I wish you all the best with it. It's an incredible piece of work you're doing, amazing solutions you're bringing as well. And I am going into the twilight of my years happier that I've spoken to you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Great, guys. Look, thank you very much for the opportunity. It was a great chat. Great chatting to you and chatting to the globe worldwide. And let's keep pushing and trying to break barriers. We've reached the ceiling. Now let's try and see if we can't push through, right?
100%. Thanks so much for your time. Take care.
Fantastic.
Likewise, man. Cheers, guys.
What an amazing guy, and what an amazing project that he's doing, encouraging people to get the skills to help one another. It's so positive, right?
Yeah, well, you can hear the passion in his voice in the answers. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, look, stick around. We're going to continue our coverage of Inclusive Africa for one more time. We'll be back after this.
Get in touch with Double Tap. Email feedback at doubletaponair.com. Leave us a voicemail at 1-877-803-4567. And now you can send an audio or video message to us on WhatsApp. That number is 1-613-481-0144.
Now, we're continuing our coverage of the Inclusive Africa Conference 2025 from Nairobi, Kenya. It wrapped up last week, and I got the chance to sit down with an amazing guy to learn about the work he's doing in his part of Africa.
Hi, my name is Alan Hubbard. I am the Executive Director of Black Albinism, an organization that champions for social inclusion for persons with albinism. We do this through sports, creative arts, and of course, advocacy and awareness creation. At the Inclusive Africa Conference 2025 edition, I am here to talk about digital access for persons with disabilities, and of course, particularly persons with albinism, who are the people that I get to serve on a daily basis. But as well, as I mentioned, I am here to try to speak to other OPD leaders and disability justice activists and any funders that I get a chance to have a conversation with to think about funding inclusively and more accessibly to make sure that the resources, the few resources as they continue to shrink, they get to the actual people who are doing the work on the grassroots. Thank you.
Yeah, well, listen, it's wonderful to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time today. Albinism is a big topic in Africa for many different reasons, and we can get into as much or as little of that as you want to. Tell us about the challenges people with albinism face across Africa today.
So, of course, I cannot speak for the whole of Africa because sometimes there is that misconstruing.
It's pretty big.
Just because you are from Kenya, then you can speak about the whole of Africa.
Yeah,
But of course, because I've had an opportunity to engage with different African leaders with albinism, within the albinism community. So I can speak authoritatively about the condition. But as you might already know, persons with albinism have this challenge of not being white enough and not being black enough. So they suffer this in-betweenness of not really knowing where do they or where should they fall. So there is that issue. And understanding that, and we are in a predominantly black, we are from Africa, of course, then we are misconstrued to be white people because of a lack of awareness. And this comes with a lot of myths and misconceptions. I don't know if you've heard about the ritual killings that happened in some parts of Africa. I would say that the rituals are sort of going down, but this does not mean that they are not still happening in some parts of the continent. So the advocacy that we do on a daily basis, we continue to advocate to make sure that these ritual practices and these myths and misconceptions are ended in entirety. Secondly, you know that persons with albinism lack what is called melanin. And of course, when you are from this side of the Sahara, then you get 360 days of sun. Then that means that persons with albinism in Africa are easily exposed to the sun rays. And if you do not protect yourself well enough, then you are let me say, a candidate of acquiring skin cancer. And if you look at statistics, skin cancer is one of the biggest killers of persons with albinism in Africa. And of course, the issue with the eyesight, some persons with albinism, unfortunately, they are subjected to schools of the blind because every person with albinism, their sight varies from one person to the other. So there are those who do not have good sight, they are subjected to schools of the blind. But with corrective eyeglasses and photochromatic glasses, then that means that, and with a little bit of assistance, inclusive education, then a person with albinism can go to any other mainstream school that they would want to go to, hence being able to achieve the dreams that they would want to have. So in a snapshot, those are some of that is a background of albinism in Africa. But also I would like to mention that Kenya recently did something that I find very interesting because I'm Kenyan, and they explicitly mentioned albinism as a disability within the Persons with Disabilities Act that was signed by the president the other day. What this means that within the law, it is enshrined in the law that persons with albinism should enjoy specific rights that help progress their life, which did not exist initially. And if this is something that other African countries are able to follow suit, then definitely that would be a right direction to take.
Yeah, it does feel like Kenya is leading the way on this to some degree. There's so much to unpack there. I mean, there really is. I had occasion to be in Ghana for an Access Africa conference many years ago, and I sat with many other people in a room. We watched the documentary talking about the ritual killings of people with albinism in Africa, and it was shocking, it was horrifying, it was eye-opening, and I mean the pun. It was horrific to learn about what was going on in certain parts of Africa. You're saying those numbers are starting to come down. That is good, and let's hope that continues to come down. For people who aren't aware of this, I don't want to dwell on it too much because I know it's not the most pleasant topic to get into. But I think for people who might wonder what on earth is going on, can you explain to us a little bit of the background of what's actually happening? I mean, this is all based on myths in certain towns and villages, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, or the world might know, that the moment you are different, the moment you are looked at or you look different from what is quote unquote considered normal, then there are so many things that are going to bedevil you. There are so many things that are going to follow you. And because persons with albinism, we are the majority of the majority, if you can get the phrase, yeah? And statistically, in every 10,000 people in Africa, there is one person with albinism. So definitely there is this sort of uniqueness that is associated with persons with albinism. And hence, I think that is where the myth started, that if these people are this unique, then there should be some value, some quote-unquote traditional value in them, that if you use them in ritual practices that sometimes or that happen on the African continent, then that ritual will work wonders. There are even misconceptions that if you sleep with a woman who has albinism, then you'll be cured of HIV and AIDS. So this is sort of the background where these whole myths and misconceptions are coming from, and they are fueling or they have been fueling the ritual killings of persons with albinism. And also in some regions of Africa, we have seen the killing of persons with albinism heighten as we edge closer to election days, because then this luck that is associated with persons with albinism, then probably these people, high-profile people in politics, think that if they do a ritual with body parts of a person with albinism, then they are more likely to win elections. These are things that have been documented in different researches that have been done by different organizations for persons with albinism. And I also believe there is a report by the independent expert on the enjoyment of the human rights for persons with albinism at the UN. And all this, what I'm talking about, is clearly documented.
Yeah, and it is. And it's an incredible story. One which, let's hope disappears entirely. I mean, Hollywood hasn't helped to some degree with some of this stuff, but it hasn't come from Hollywood entirely. This is cultural to some degree. It's local to some degree. And hopefully these are some things that we can start to move past on eventually. But I want to move on to the next part of this, which I don't think you could connect. It may be connected in some ways. There are certainly similarities across here, but you talk about acceptance by society. But I think it's more close to home than that, isn't it? It's acceptance by family when you talk about not being white enough or not being black enough. It's like being low vision or blind. If you're low vision, you're not blind enough, but you're not sighted enough. So you're not accepted in either community. I would say it's probably worse in some ways what you're talking about, from what you're saying. But there's a real issue here, because I know, for example, speaking to people when I was over there in Ghana, many people telling me that they were pushed out of their families entirely. They were not welcomed by their families because of their albinism.
Absolutely. And then that entirely breaks persons with albinism and how they get to grow and the type of human beings or adults that we get at the end of the day. So picture this. You are born of a mother and a father, but then the father decides to run away for whatever reasons, and then you are left to be raised with the mother. And the mother's family might not entirely accept you wholeheartedly, because also you are looked at as a child that led to the dreams of your mother to be stopped right in half. And there are even situations through the work that I've been doing through Black Albinism. I had a story, because most times we've heard that fathers run away and they leave their children. But I had a story where a mother ran away and left her 2 children with albinism with the father. So it's neither here nor there. There is already a challenge that once you are born, you are not accepted within your own family. So if this acceptance does not begin at home, how are you going to be accepted in the community? And if you do not have this sense of belonging, then how are you able to build the confidence for you to be able to go on with your daily life as a person with albinism? Hence, sometimes I even argue that for persons with albinism, it is not an issue of the disability or the visual impairment, but it is an issue of the emotional damage that they have gone through that has dented their self-confidence, that does not allow them to fully develop into fully grown human beings, to fully explore the opportunities with vigor as they would in normal circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible that the mountains that have to be climbed here in some ways. But does technology play a part in this? Because, the theme I've been getting from the conference generally, we've been talking about education, we've been talking about other challenges, oftentimes having the conversation in a way that other people can hear. So using technology, social media, all of those things. Does that help infiltrate some of these communities where these problems exist?
I love this question, and particularly why I love this question is because I am very big on media advocacy, because my background is also in journalism. So we are seeing the myths and misconceptions that have been happening at village level. Now they are being transferred onto the internet. And myths that were only within a locality now are being brought onto the global village of the internet. So you would find that even persons with albinism who would want to demystify the myths that have been created about them, they are being shut down by a global community and reinforcing the same myths and misconceptions that they're talking about. So you are basically being bombarded from home within the community that you have grown in, and now the social media platforms and the digital spaces that we should be able to create systems or create communities that are able to understand us. So then you ask yourself, where do I really start, or where do I really fall for me to be able to exclusively and wholeheartedly or inclusively talk about me and showcase the abilities that I have out there in the world. But through my organization, we have a digital literacy program where we work with persons with albinism who have an interest in creating digital content, and we train them and talk to them about cyberbullying, and we talk to them about and we talk to them about cyberbullying and what they would be able to do to make sure that they push back on some of this cyberbullying, and also how do they create community to find people that understand them and people who would be willing to build a huge community with them. I'll give an example. Sometimes I do, not sometimes, most of the times I do political commentary through my journalism work. And over time, I have been able to build a community of followers that if anybody comes onto my platform and they concentrate on my albinism rather than the type of content that I'm putting out, I don't have to stop them. The community themselves stop them. So that shows that if we use the digital spaces right, and we consistently create a community, then that sense of us fighting for ourselves will be lifted from us, and then the community that we have been able to build is able to fight for us.
And I know you're going to be talking about this at the conference as well, because you're really keen to help those creators to start building that content, to start getting that confidence to tell their stories and create the community around it.
Yeah. I am going to be talking about it, but also talk about it in extension to the entrepreneurship aspect, because I look at digital platforms not only as a place to create community, but also how can we enterprise around those opportunities, around social media.
I love this.
So yes, and if you look at, I'll use an example of TikTok and the kind of enterprises that it has been able to help to build in a country like the United States. These are some opportunities. These are the same opportunities that we would like to explore from a Kenyan context.
Just wrapping up, I mean, are you feeling confident about the future? You're talking about the number of ritual killings going down, the voice of black albinism, people with albinism talking up.
Yep.
Are you feeling that that we're heading in a good direction?
We are heading in a good direction, yes. But who is taking us into that direction? We need to be able to empower as many voices as myself to be able to pick up the mantle and push us in that direction. I am a believer that no cause is too big or too small for a single person. A cause is supposed to be for a community. So if a cause is for a community and the more people we bring into the fold, then that would mean that we get where we want to get easier. What I'm trying to talk about is we shouldn't feel as if this conversation is only supposed to be led by one person. We must be able to bring together a village, because either way, it is the villages that are discriminating. It is the villages that are reinforcing these myths. So if I only go to the village as Alan, probably they're never going to listen. But if we go to the village as a village, then we'll be able to change the perspectives and the myths and misconceptions that they have around albinism. And this is how we're going to be able to impact a policy change in employment, policy change in education, policy change in advocacy, policy change in digital access and all of that. But the future is luminous. But the future is for us to be able to work together as a collective.
I could not agree more. It's something I've pushed for a lot here on this show. When we talk about technology and people around me say, hey, should I start a podcast? I'm like, of course, absolutely. We need more voices. It cannot be one or two people leading the charge here. We need voices. We need lots of different opinions, lots of different viewpoints. It's so vital that we have a community that is us, that is who we are. Your village analogy is just bang on. If I was there with you right now, Alan, I'd shake your hand. I really appreciate
Absolutely.
your time. Thank you
I will
so
shake
much
the
for
hand
coming on.
virtually.
Yeah, let's do it virtually. Thanks so much for coming on, Alan. I appreciate it.
A pleasure is all mine.
Whew, I honestly don't know what to say about that one. It was just, I mean, there's challenges and there's challenges, right? That's a difficult problem.
Yeah, and I thank Alan for being so open, and I thank all our guests for that. The openness that we've had here and the welcoming we got from the team at Inclusive Africa was just amazing. And a huge thank you to everyone who was involved in bringing us the coverage. Dan, our wonderful cameraman, Lily, who was running around getting all the guests for us. Just an amazing crew of people, and everyone who was there. Just an amazing event. And hopefully next year we'll either get to do this again in real life or in virtual form again. Either way, we'll definitely be covering this event again. We definitely want to do that. Listen, that's it for today. We're back tomorrow with coverage of Apple's WWDC event. Stay tuned for that. We'll catch you tomorrow. Thanks, Shaun.
Thank you. Bye-bye.